One time I went home, I happened to meet my aunt. She told me a lot of stories from when she was in middle school. That year she was still a high school girl and had to stay in the school dormitory. When it wasn't developed, everything was very poor, and the living conditions in the dormitory were also difficult. My aunt shared a room with another girl named Ling. That night, both of them turned off the lights and went to sleep. Auntie Ling was fast asleep at the time, but in the middle of the night she started having nightmares. Her whole body was sweating like having a bath. She felt like someone was pressing down on her feet, staring at her. Ling wanted to open her eyes, but she couldn't. In a blur, Ling saw the ghost child crawling on top of her. She was scared, she wanted to scream, she wanted to pull away, but couldn't move her hands and couldn't even make a sound. The baby crawled on top of her chest, making her feel like short of breath. She tried to wake up but couldn't. In the morning, when everyone was about to go to school, my aunt saw Ling still asleep. She and another friend came to wake her up. After calling for a long time, Ling slowly woke up. When she woke up, she felt her neck suddenly feeling very heavy and painful. It was like there was something on her neck that kept her upright. The whole morning, there was no way to fix this, making her extremely miserable. The next morning, my aunt just reported to the teacher and helped bring Ling to the clinic. The doctor checked Ling's head, neck and shoulders but still found nothing special. However, the doctor also suggested a treatment for Ling, giving her a bandage to correct her shoulders and neck. But as impossible as it may seem, after one day the pain would still not go away. Ling felt very strongly that something was sitting on her shoulder, just that she couldn't see it. Everyone in the dorm room also started talking and whispering. Some students also heard rumors that this dormitory was built on a cemetery. This information was not known to anyone, so the students just took it as a rumor until someone was actually haunted by a ghost. Another student who was my aunt's classmate also recounted, saying that on the night that she went to the toilet alone, she saw a child crawling out of the toilet. This ghost giggled through the hallway. The girl was terrified. Regarding the rumor of the child ghost, some classmates said that they knew the child's background. The story went that many years ago, one night after everyone had slept, a cry of pain came from the corridor of the teacher's quarters. The screams came from the toilet. So many curious people ran to see what was wrong. Then, in a room they saw a girl who died in a pitiful position in her pajamas, surrounded by blood flowing like a river. In the latrine they also found a dead infant. Since then, people had always seen this ghost child. What the friends recounted made Ling feel scared, wondering if the child was clinging to her or not. After that, my aunt's friends also told her and Ling to report this matter to the principal so that he could find a solution and help bring Ling to treatment. After that, my aunt and Ling went to see the principal. They told the whole story to the principal, including the dream that Ling had. The principal suddenly shouted at Ling's face, but as if shouting at someone other than her. "If you don't hurry down or I'll beat you to death!" As soon as the words ended, Ling began to feel the weight on her shoulders gradually disappear. Her shoulders became lighter. Ling was also able to stand up straight again. She looked at the principal in surprise, but the principal said nothing, only telling them to quickly return to their rooms. This incident my aunt remembers very well, and the dormitory never had a problem ever again. This story happened in my hometown many years ago. One year, a house burned down with valuable items incinerated by the flames. The villagers worked together to try and extinguish the fire, but unfortunately it was too late. The house that burned down belonged to a widow named Ling. The older woman lived alone and had a strange habit of talking to herself too much. After extinguishing the fire, the older woman was found burned to death in her house. There was a strong smell of burn everywhere. Everything was burned to ashes. But there was a strange thing: people did not find any signs of the fire at the corner of the house. The villagers came and saw a tablet on the table, but it was unclear what was written on it. Although the worship table had been burned to coal, that tablet was still intact, and the fire did not reach. There was a dead person in the house, plus the strangeness of the worship tablet, so the villagers were afraid to get each other out. After that, the villagers buried the widow's body properly, while the house was abandoned for a long time. A few years later, a drunk man from the village passed by the house in the middle of the night. The man was half awake, half dreaming, when he heard a woman calling to him. He looked around to find out that the voice was coming from the widow's abandoned house. Thinking someone was inside, he also went in without hesitation. Suddenly, there was a voice of the woman asking him to take her out, and she would repay the favor. Although he couldn't see anyone, the man saw the worship tablet lying there. He had drunk a lot of alcohol that night, so he did not feel afraid when he knew that the worship tablet was talking to him. He picked up the tablet to look at it, and the voice inside the worship tablet came out again. The following day, while the man was sleeping, his wife woke him up with a morning song of scolding. The man woke up, bewildered, when he heard his wife ask about the worship tablet. He realized that he was holding a worship tablet in his hands. He didn't know how he brought it back, so he was surprised and scared. When he was about to throw it away, the worship tablet suddenly said, "Don't throw me. I will make you rich." The worship tablet also prophesied that there would be a severe drought the following year, telling the man to buy and save food and also sell it in the next year. After that, he would quickly become rich as long as he worshipped this tablet. Believing the worship tablet's words, the man began to look forward to next year's good fortune. Gritting his teeth to endure, the man borrowed money everywhere and hoarded a lot of food. He placed it at the solemn place in his house. The following year, indeed, the countryside experienced a severe drought, crop failure, and constant famine. The man quickly sold the food he had hoarded at many times the price and made a lot of money. He bought a few large tiled houses and lived a life of wealth that everyone admired. The tablet was also worshipped as a god, full of incense every day. One day the tablet prophesied again, telling him to bury all his possessions, hide all his money, and hide because tonight someone would come and try and arrest him. The man immediately followed suit, fleeing with the worship tablet. Yes, that night, some robbers indeed broke into his house, but after searching for him, they couldn't find anything of value. After a few days, he and his wife returned home, and although their belongings were destroyed, their money was not lost. He was extremely grateful for the tablet, worshipping it day and night. In the end, the tablet said it could only help him 3 times, and 2 times had already passed. It asked him if he had any last wishes. The man thought for a while, seeing that he had a house and money, only lack of a beautiful woman because he thought his wife was too ugly. So he begged the worship tablet for a beautiful wife. That very night, as he was sleeping next to his wife, she did not change. Well, nothing had changed. She was still the same. He began to get impatient. He wanted to meet his beautiful wife, so he struggled to fall asleep, occasionally also glancing over at his wife. Every hour that passed, his wife changed her skin and gradually turned into a beautiful young person. The only thing was a big scar on her neck, like a cut. But he ignored that, proudly taking his wife down the street every day to show her off to everyone. 2 years later, while shopping together, the husband and wife met an older man who insisted that the man's wife was the older man's daughter. The man's parents and the wife's parents had both passed away, so having a stranger approach like that made him extremely angry. After asking, he found out that the older man's daughter died 2 years ago. This man's wife had the same appearance as the older man's daughter, so he got it wrong. The two felt that the older man was pitiful, so they later accepted the old man and wife as their parents took care of them. The following year, the man's wife gave birth to a fat baby boy, making everyone in the family happy. It was just that, well, the worship tablet never spoke again. The man didn't ask for anything either, but still regularly burned incense and prayed every day as a way to repay the favor. As someone who's addicted to fishing, I've always enjoyed talking about it, except for one instance when something inexplicable happened. I'm referring to when my friend and I experienced something odd during a night of fishing. It started when Ben and I went night fishing on the river. It must be said that Ben was a skilled fisherman, and whenever he caught a fish, its size was usually bigger than average. After a few hours of fishing, I got hungry. It was boring when we didn't prepare anything, so we had to eat whatever we could find or catch. I suggested packing 2 or 3 fish and grilling them, as I was in charge of packing the fish and Ben was in charge of finding firewood. Ben went to the edge of the forest to find some not too far from us, and along the road he found plenty of dry branches lying around. After collecting some of it, Ben was startled to see something red in the dark of night. As he got closer, he discovered a red dress. He wondered what the hell was going on. At the same time, I finished wrapping the fish, just waiting for the firewood to grill. After a while, Ben returned with a bundle of firewood wrapped in the red dress. Originally, Ben intended to use it to light a fire. I didn't bother too much with him using the red dress as tinder for the fire. We talked while waiting for the fish to cook. After chatting for a few seconds, Ben's face suddenly changed as he stopped talking. He made a strange sound in his throat, so low that I barely noticed. He reached for the fish over the fire and started devouring the fish while it was still undercooked, looking like he found it irresistible and delicious, which was not surprising, but I was a bit concerned that the fish was still undercooked. I decided to stop Ben from eating all of it as it could make him sick. But Ben suddenly went crazy. He shouted at me and jumped at me to grab the fish as I realized something had gone terribly wrong. Ben seemed to have lost his mind and control of his body. I'd never heard of him having epilepsy or anything like that before. A hunch told me that something scary had happened related to the red dress earlier, so I quickly overpowered Ben and brought him back to the car. At first, he resisted fiercely as if some terrifying force was controlling him, and it took a long while for Ben to calm down. Ben fell asleep, and I wanted to take him to the hospital to make sure he was okay, as the situation seemed to have passed. I finally decided to rather take Ben back to his house. After getting everything sorted and packed, we left. Eventually, Ben was back home with his wife sleeping in bed. But late at night, his wife was woken up by a strange sound. She saw him rummaging through the closet like he was looking for something. He tossed his clothing everywhere and didn't reply to his wife either. Only then did he find his wife's light red dress in the closet. Ben pulled it out and looked at it for a while. Shockingly, he decided to put it on. Then he went to sleep as if nothing had happened. His wife felt strange but thought her husband was just sleepwalking, so she didn't say anything and fell asleep after a while herself. Early the following day when she woke up, the wife did not see Ben next to her and had no idea where he might have gone. She called me to see if he was at my place. As soon as she asked, I remember how Ben's expression changed since grilling that fish. I quickly drove his wife to the riverbank where we fished last night to have a look. As we guessed, we found Ben in the forest. He was kneeling in front of a tree with his wife's red dress hanging from it. Both of his feet were covered in blood, perhaps because he came barefoot. It was not a short distance. His wife was just about to walk up to him to wake him up, but as soon as she touched him, he fell lifeless to the ground. His whole body went cold. His skin was also red and raw, his breath extremely weak, and his condition seemed critical. I decided to drag Ben back to the car. His wife wanted to take back the red dress, but I immediately stopped her because I understood that there was a link between Ben and this dress. I knew for sure that Ben was probably possessed by evil spirits or something. Fortunately, when he arrived at the hospital and was treated, Ben woke up without remembering what happened after he collected firewood and touched that red dress. Needless to say, we unanimously decided never to return to that cursed fishing spot ever again. As a child, I lived in the countryside for a while and heard many ghost stories. I myself had seen ghosts a few times. However, I couldn't say I had seen ghosts with anyone because it was still very mysterious to me. In my days of going to elementary school, I once saw a ghost while crossing a small bridge. That day my friend and I were joking around, so we decided to go under the bridge. Here, I experienced a rather strange phenomenon. There were 3 4th grade girls there. One knelt on the ground and repeatedly slapped her cheek, and the other 2 stood aside with a somewhat worried look on their faces. I quickly went over to ask what they were performing. I also realized that the girl kneeling was Hen, living in the same neighborhood as myself. When I saw it clearly, I realized that these girls weren't joking. Hen's cheeks were slapped until puffy, and her face black. I found it strange that anyone would beat themselves so cruelly. The other 2 girlfriends were dumbfounded, did not act, and did not intervene, which made me curious. It turned out they couldn't stop. It was like people who were glued to the ground. Seeing that, I walked over and pulled Hen up. But it seemed that the girl was very strong, even stronger than an adult. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pull her up. I often heard stories about being possessed by demons, so I knew this girl was not fine. I quickly ran to the girl's house to ask for help. I told her parents about what happened. Likewise, after her parents arrived, they couldn't stop Hen from slapping herself, so the mother asked the rest of them what happened. The girls both cried and sniffled. In that late afternoon, when the children were walking together, Hen wanted to take a break. She went to a lawn by the embankment for convenience. The other 2 girls did not feel anything, and after waiting for a while, Hen went out. But ever since Hen returned from the lawn, she kept her head down without saying a word. After walking a few steps, the girl suddenly fell to the ground with a strong thud. Then she started slapping herself. The 2 of her friends tried to stop it but couldn't and didn't understand why she was acting like that. The matter was clarified after Hen's mother returned to the village and found a woman with experience in exorcism in the countryside. She was a person who could exterminate demons. Although she was not a witch, she could also drive away demons. When Hen arrived, the older woman was still holding a bowl. She walked up to Hen and suddenly threw water in her face. When the water spilled, I knew what kind of water was in the bowl. After that, Hen fell to the ground. Her parents took her home to rest for a week before going back to school. The older woman also warned us that under the bridge there were a lot of unjust souls. If we ever got near that area, we should not speak any dirty words or act rudely, lest we be the same again. Someone said that in the past on that spot there was an untimely death. The man was a builder, but he was always drunk while working. That day he did not come back from work, but at night he slept on the pile of materials. The two other workers immediately came to shake him up and discovered that he was already dead. The reason for the death was being drunk. It sounded absurd, but it was true. He still held an empty bottle of wine in his hand and had no wounds on his body. The people in the village thought that the man died because of the wind. Seeing that this victim came from another place to live there temporarily without relatives, he was buried in the embankment field. There was no one to worship and clean the area, so soon this tomb was overgrown with grass. The place where Hen went to the bathroom was the same place where the tomb was placed. There was another story also related to that tomb. That day, when I was doing my homework, my aunt ran over to ask if my father had seen her husband going anywhere. My father saw that my aunt was worried and he ran out to find her husband, and I also followed curiously. We asked around the village if anyone had seen my uncle, but to no avail. Then we ran to the little shop and they said that my uncle had bought a lot of alcohol and left the village. The strange thing was that my uncle was not a drinker at all. My father and aunt found the path leading to the tunnel from the owner's instructions. Normally when coming home from work, my uncle would never go this way, so no one thought that he would be there. And then we were all surprised to find him in that place. He was lying on the edge of the rock, seemingly drunk and unconscious. Next to him were a few bottles and dishes. My uncle was taken to the hospital for treatment. Fortunately, he was saved in time, so everyone was okay. But when people asked my uncle why he went to that place to drink, he did not know anything. But everyone understood that this story was related to the man who died while building the bridge. Up to now, that place had been reclaimed and repaired, and the tomb had been moved, so everything was peaceful. But these stories I still remembered vividly and used to scare the naughty or destructive children in the family and the neighborhood. This is a true story which I had the opportunity to witness from beginning to end. Because this happened to my mother, not a stranger. One morning my father made breakfast for the whole family to eat because my mother was not feeling well. When my mom came out of the bedroom, her face was very haggard and worn out. I was worried, so I asked her what was wrong. She also made no secret of it. She said that she had a terrible nightmare in which a person appeared. Someone my mother didn't want to talk about. A man who died many years ago. This person was my uncle, Lou, who died of liver disease a few years ago. My mother dreamt of him subconsciously. She wondered why he was not dead and what he came to see her for. My uncle also said that he was not dead. He was currently locked in a coffin so he could not go out, and told my mother to quickly ask my father to come and remove him from the coffin. My uncle said that he was just plain dead. That day, after waking up, he found himself locked in a coffin. He used all 10 fingers to scratch and scream, but no one listened and he could not get out. Then he held out 10 fingers to show my mother the pain he had to endure. He screamed in anger, his face turned into a devil, forcing my mother to go to see my aunt and release him. My mother was frightened by him and screamed loudly and sat up, out of that nightmare. My uncle was a bad person when he was still alive. Whenever he got drunk, he would beat my aunt mercilessly. He would break things and treated his siblings badly. So everyone in the family hated him, and my mother didn't know why she dreamt of him. After a while, she fell asleep again. Then she continued to dream of my uncle coming, and he begged her to tell my aunt to let him go. Just like that, my uncle made my mother toss and turn all night. She was unable to sleep. Dad told me to call my aunt to ask what was going on, but my mom didn't want that. She didn't want to talk to her then. Even stranger than that, one night when I got home from school, as soon as I entered through the door, I saw my aunt sitting on the sofa of the house. This time my aunt came without telling us first, which surprised me too. At this time the atmosphere in the house seemed quieter than usual. Everyone had sad expressions. I later found out that my aunt often dreamt of my uncle, dreams about resentment and mourning, and about him who had just died. Every time she dreamt of him, he cursed her. "Damn it! You hate me so much that you buried me alive!" He even strangled, tormented, threatened to kill my aunt if she didn't let him out. My aunt almost dreamt of him coming often. She also fell into a state of depression. She couldn't take it anymore. When my grandmother heard the news, she saw this and she decided to invite an exorcist. By using 7 peach wooden stakes, he stuck it onto my uncle's grave, sealing his soul for several years. My aunt never dreamt of my uncle since then, but she didn't expect my mother to dream of him coming back at all. My father was also very curious. Why didn't she open the grave to see if there was something wrong with him? A few days later, my aunt and my family went back to my hometown. We went to the uncle's grave to excavate. Everyone proceeded to open the coffin and everyone was anxiously waiting to see what was inside. The moment the coffin lid was opened, a whiff of white gas flew out of the coffin. No one could imagine my uncle lying in the coffin, reaching out his hand as if scratching the lid of the coffin. The tips of his fingers were almost crushed, looking painful before he died. There were also scratches on the coffin lid, and everyone could understand how helpless and desperate he must have been. Which meant my uncle could have been buried alive when he was just drunk and unconscious. And when he woke up, he tried to find a way out of the coffin. Finally, my uncle was indeed buried again. My mother had not dreamt of my uncle since then. Only my aunt sometimes dreams of him with great regret.